an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering Sunshine by Robin McKinley. The remainder of Part 3. Page numbers unknown and unnecessary. In these chapters, it turns out SOF might be doing something even sketchier than previously surmised. And also, I love Yolande so much, and I just kind of want her to be like my super powerful grandma. Does that sound right? I just love her. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Natasha. Many thanks to Rachel for sponsoring this episode. This is the first episode of this book that has not been sponsored by Rosalie Oceana Kolbs. Thank you, Rachel, for stepping up, because I'm sure it's been a bit of a strain for Rosalie. So this section, guys, I keep being startled by how much more information there clearly is about this world that this author has not even gotten a chance to delve into. And I just am awed by the amount of thought that she has put into certain things. And when I mention that now, what I'm thinking about is tattoos and exactly what goes into that and how that works. So I will get into that once we get to that section where she's talking to Mel. But for right now, let us begin at the beginning. Hi, Rosalie is here now. Yay. And Margaret is here. Okay. So we, start off with Ray driving herself home. I feel like I should be calling her Sunshine because that's what everybody else calls her, but it feels so absurd to me that I just can't do it. So I'm just going to continue to call her Ray. And she is heading back to her house and realizes that SOF has probably set something up near her house to try and track other activity, and decides that it would be a good idea to send a message to Khan to not show up, because he is wont to just show up. So what she does it says, I hadn't cleaned up all that well from last night, so it was easy to fish out a few wax chips from the candles Yolande had given me and dump them into a smudge bowl and light a candle under them. I waited till the chips began to grow soft and I could smell faintly their aroma. Then I closed my eyes and aligned myself. I didn't want to go anywhere, I just wanted to leave a message. The chain around my neck began to feel warm, only a little warm. So this is kind of an interesting moment that really brought to mind some stuff that I haven't really considered, but is it, she has a phone. Does she mention having a cell phone? She does, right? I feel like, can vampires not use them, or is she not wanting to use one because she's pretty sure that SOF is going to be watching them anyway? I don't feel like she's got Khan's phone number. So even if he had one, I'm pretty sure it would be irrelevant at the moment. But just, there is a weird sort of gap in this world between what we would consider modern technology. And to some degree, that's just when this was written, of course, because I don't think this is a few years old at this point, right? But also the technology in this world is so much more focused on safety from others that there's not that entertainment aspect, at least not as heavily in the universe that Ray resides in, because she's in a working class universe. It might be different if we were seeing everything from the perspective of somebody with a lot of money. But yeah, so all of the tech is really focused on, being able to create different kinds of, for example, metal alloys are brought up in this section that are infused with wards, and that is what they now build cars from. There's just all kinds of little like drops of information that I feel like they should have occurred to me, or not even should have occurred to me, because there's no reason for me to be thinking in that direction. More like, I wonder if I had been creating this world, would I have ever thought of that? So I really like the fact that it seems that Robin McKinley, it's almost like she sat down with one of those like world building like sheets that you would get at a like writing 101 class, and she started it and then just went nuts in every direction and filled up like 600 sheets and just really kept asking herself questions like, well, if they ward stuff, what do they ward? Maybe houses, maybe people, maybe cars. We spend a lot of time in cars. How does warding work on cars? And we find out that every car manufacturer in the world has a ward worked into their logo, and that the logo being stamped on axles and steering wheels means that you automatically have a car that's got some wards on it, no matter what car you buy. Those are just considered standard wards. But you can have people put additional wards on your car. For example, the one that Sunshine thought she had that apparently does not work was to ensure that the car could not be broken into. Or at least specifically it was on the locks, I guess. But there are all kinds of things that you could do and all kinds of specialties. So yeah, I just really enjoy that she seems to have really taken her time creating and following all of these threads, and it's sort of like doing an improv activity, you know? So the next day, she is just really sore again. Like, she's just been going through a lot and has had to experience a lot of trauma, like emotionally and physically. So every day it just feels like she's waking up with more bruises of different kinds. And when she goes outside, Yolande is out there cutting flowers and asks her if she would be down to come and have some tea. And Yolande is, she asks if the candles and herbs that she gave to Ray the other night worked for finding her friend, to which Ray is like, yes, very, very well. A little too well. And it's almost like there's something about Yolande, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it makes me I have the suspicion that she knows more about Ray than she's saying. And I don't know if that's because she has a secret, if it's because she's trying to protect Ray, if it's because there's some sort of like allegiance, because the fact that Ray, who is the daughter of like one of the most famous sorcerers ever, wound up living with like a master wardsmith, that feels like it's not a coincidence. And maybe it is, but you know. So there's a moment about, and this isn't important at all, but Yolande pulled my cup toward her, settled the tiny silver sieve on it, and poured. And she talks about how the coffee house offers all of this amazing food and even champagne, but they did not have loose tea. And she insisted that they add that, and says, our post-lunch afternoon crowd had instantly ballooned. Must be more Albion exiles in New Arcadia than we thought. Albion had been hit very badly by the wars. Albion, is that something that we've heard about before? Am I supposed to remember where that is or anything? I just don't know if, because that didn't mean anything to me, but I couldn't tell if it was supposed to or not. Margaret says no. Okay, cool. I highlighted that because I was like, I feel like she's saying this as if I'm supposed to sort of know what this means, but, so when they're talking about like the difference between being a wards keeper and being a magic handler. And there's this sort of assumption that Ray has that you have such a strong like there's this boot camp that goes into being a words keeper that causes you to be more prepared by the time you actually start messing around with real shit. Apparently, this is a misconception because Yolande laughs in her face, essentially, and says, "Only in theory. Tell me, what were your first cinnamon rolls like? And didn't the recipe look simple and pure and beautiful on the page? And the instructions your teacher gave you before he left you to get on with it were perfectly clear and covered everything?" I smiled reminiscently, stirring sugar into my tea. "They were little round bricks. I still don't know how I did it. They got heavier. They can't have weighed more than the flour I put into them, but I swear they did. There's a family myth that Charlie used them in the wall he was building around Mom's rose garden. I wouldn't be surprised." To which Yolande says, "The first time I cut a ward sign, cutting a sign is your first big step up from drawing all the basic ones over and over and over, and you long for it. I managed to wreck the workshop. Fortunately, my master believed my talent was going to be worth it, if we all survived my apprenticeship." So I like this story, Yolande is really as realistic and practical as you're going to get. I just enjoy her a lot. I appreciate that kind of attitude. It can be overdone, but, and she also can sense that the necklace that Ray is wearing is from her friend. I don't know if she knows exactly what it does, but if she does, she doesn't say, which is driving me a little bananas, because I want somebody to just say exactly what this necklace does, because I feel like just summoning her, giving her a way back to Khan isn't all it is. There's got to be more here, especially now that she did that, introduction thing with her seal and her knife. I feel like there's got to be something. And then they talk about how old Yolande is, and she doesn't say exactly, but she says older perhaps than you think. Magic handling has that effect. It's not a very reliable effect, and ordinary ward and spellcrafters won't notice much difference. But to those of us who soak ourselves deeply in a magical source, it can have profound consequences. This is not a chosen thing, or it chooses you, not the other way around. So then we find out, because I think that I think I mentioned this a couple episodes ago, or maybe even last episode, that I didn't remember if we had found out whether or not her grandmother was still alive. And it turns out she doesn't even know her father is dead, which I had assumed her father was dead. And there is no evidence of that, evidently. She just kind of figures that they're dead, but because she thinks that there's no way, if her grandmother was still alive, that she wouldn't have let her know. So that was kind of startling. The possibility that her dad is still out there doing God knows what. I don't know. I'm very curious about this. And it's got me thinking, is her dad part of something that she's going to be running into? Is he going to wind up being a factor? I feel like he has to. But I hope it's I just, how that is where somebody's arch enemy, it turns out is oh, you're the one who killed my parents or something like this. I'm hoping that it doesn't feel too goofy, whatever it is, if he does show up at all. And if her grandmother shows up, I don't know how that's going to work. But yeah, I just can't overstate how little I even thought about her dad in any terms other than the preconceptions people had about her due to him. So she talks about how all of the people who are in her family just live these really normal lives, and they don't remember her dad. They don't think about the others. It doesn't seem to be that important to them, and it just is for her, and she doesn't really get how her mother and father could have met, because her mother's that way also, and they're just so opposite. How did they even get together? And asks, what happened to the safety net, If I was going to turn out this way, why didn't I get apprenticed? Why didn't my gran leave a codicil in her will asking someone to keep an eye on me? She taught me to transmute. She knew I had inherited something. Yolande didn't say anything for several minutes while I sat there trying not to be embarrassed for my outburst. I don't believe in fate, she said at last, but I do believe in loopholes. I think a lot of what keeps the world going is the result of accidents, happy or otherwise, and taking advantage of these. Perhaps your Gran guessed you might be one of those loopholes. Perhaps she left a codicil in her will saying to leave you alone at all costs. What if you'd been apprenticed and learned that there is no way through Nowheresville? I like that especially because there is some truth to the idea that if you have not been taught by a pro, you are not going to get imbued with the same limitations that a professional is going to have, and that may lead you to being able to do things they would never have taught you to do or believed you could do, simply because they are so steeped in how it has always been done and how they were taught that they don't have the imagination for that anymore. That's a real danger of just getting older, is losing your imagination and doing something the same way as you always have, only because you have never even considered there's another way. Probably because the way that it works right now seems just fine. There's no reason for you to try and think outside the box, you know? So yeah, that whole concept to me is really, I appreciated that she brought that up. Rosalie says, I feel like the So You Want to Be a Wizard kids have a lot of that, of doing things outside the box because nobody has ever taught them. That makes sense. I haven't seen as much, I know that there's 10 more books in that series. Hopefully we'll get started on that one eventually. But I bet there's even more of that than in the first one when they're still sort of getting their feet under them. So she's having trouble settling down because she keeps thinking about, it's not in the text here, but the idea basically is that she knows that her and Khan are going to have to face up against Bo at some point, and she knows that Khan is going to come over and but there's nothing to be done about it now, and he's probably not coming over now because she sent him that message about the ticker. And just overall, there's this sense of unsettled, uneasiness when you're restless and you want to do something, but they're really it's a waiting game right now. So she's trying to read and she can't focus, and she goes and uses her comm box and catches up with some stuff, but it's just she's going a little stir crazy here. And then we have this, oh man, I forgot about this weird thing that she mentions, that the one of the methods you can use to hide from vampires is to get hemo treatment, which basically you not only get plastic surgery to just change what you look like, but you get a treatment that would change your blood makeup so that they wouldn't be able to smell your scent and know it was you anymore, which is a crazy concept. And I really like that. It's incredibly expensive and has been known to kill people. You know, you win some, you lose some. But yeah, that's a pretty wild idea. And it does seem like something that you would try and come up with, right? Because there's got to be plenty of people out there who've gotten on the wrong side of vampires. So yeah, and again, another example of things that I haven't thought of or wouldn't have considered. And she's clearly delved deep into what ifs on this. So Khan finally does come by, and when she tells him that Yolande is involved and that she has set up some new wards and knows about him and knows that he's becoming the whole deal, he is a little uneasy about that. And he doesn't say so, but she can tell by his body language and the way that he sort of shuts down. And she thinks to herself, if she found out that he had told one of his friends about her, that she would feel equally uneasy. So initially her instinct is to get a little annoyed with him and be like, dude, it's fine. And then when she puts it in perspective a little bit, she's like, you know what? Okay, yeah. But she's cool. It's fine. She's a ward's keeper. She's really useful to have on your side. So she takes his hand And this thing it goes so fast that I had to read this section twice because I got a little bit confused and disoriented, which is the point. But I'm going to read this to you guys. I was so keyed up I didn't think about our disastrous last meeting till I'd already taken his hand, and then it was too late. He came back from wherever he'd been, presumably thinking about having another human foisted on him, and looked at me. His fingers curled around mine. I had a sense-around Dolby flash of the 10 seconds that didn't go anywhere, but I hit the mental sensor button and it went poof. "Listen," I said, although it was even less like listening than the non-sound of him moving towards me had been like listening. It was strangely easier, too, doing it with him, showing him my new roadmap rather than trying to figure it out myself. He knew the language and the landscape. I had a great idea. Next time Pat called me into SOF for technical mayhem, I'd bring Con. "Hi, I'd like you to meet my helpful vampire friend. Don't worry, my landlady is a retired wards keeper, and she says he's okay." So I stared into Con's green eyes and aligned myself, or him, like you might take someone's shoulders and turn them round so they're facing the right direction. Like you might point at a map once you've told your companion, "See, it's those mountains you see right over there." For a very nasty moment, I thought I'd somehow managed to remake the live contact. That we weren't looking at a map of those mountains, but had been transported there, and the tigers were closing in. I jerked back, but Con's hand held me, and the jerk was like the click-over of the kaleidoscope, and the colored bits fell into a new arrangement. It was weirdly something like looking through an aquarium at a lot of fish. The fish were whizzing around like crazy, cannonball fish, but I could see them individually, a little, and they did look like distinct and specific little whizzings around, instead of like chaos. This was interesting, although it didn't really get me any farther. They were still moving too fast for me to track a pattern or make my way among them. But this wasn't as sick-making or as terrifying to watch or think about. Presumably, this was a good thing, but I remembered the quality of the terror and wasn't sure that not being terrified was wise or sane. What we were looking for was behind the whizzing things, and that was still just as sick-making, just as terrifying. I didn't like this animated three-dimensional map. Here be dragons. Much worse than any dragon, which are pretty straightforward and straightforwardly alive. Creatures that merely suffer that little character defect about liking to eat human flesh. Here be horrors indescribable. Somebody rang my bell. I barely sensed the dreadful loom of it, the differentiation of it from its magic pinball machine guard system, before I was repulsed, hurled away more violently than Con had thrown me the other night, except it was Con this time who caught me. So, this moment, she's having the same experience that she had when she was, like, using the computer? Is that what this is? Because I felt like confused about exactly what's happening here. That, like, she's able to zero in on the exact thing that she had been, but without needing a comm box this time. So, like, the comm box that she used when she was with Pat that wound up, like, blowing out the entire system, that was just like what's the word I want? That was just like an orienter or something, and now, because she saw it the one time, she's got like a lock on it and can look and see it again. Is that right? Feel right? And she can connect with Con in this weird specific way because of their blood connection and whatever, with her making him immune to sunlight and everything. So there's like that connection there where he can see it the way that she can also see it. That's kind of wild. So she asks him, like, she's nauseous, first of all. Rosalie says, like, you can only find it if you already know the way. Yeah, that seems so the computer, like, initiated it, and now she's able to zero in on it alone. So he tells her, first of all, he calls her my sunshine, which I'm like, that's a little familiar, Con. I don't know about that, buddy. My sunshine, you must learn moderation. This is not an enemy you can defeat by rushing his front gate. I made a little choking noise that might have been third cousin twice removed to a laugh. I had no intention of anything resembling gate crashing. I thought I was just looking. Except it wasn't, looking. No, said Khan. I could feel him thinking. If you were a new one of us, there are things I could teach you. I do not think I can teach a human these things. I believe you. Like seeing in the dark probably doesn't bother you because you don't spend a lot of time seeing in the light, right? I am sorry. So finally she asks, was that him? Can you track him any better from what I showed you? And he says, I'm not sure. It's certainly a signal we want to take seriously. How we take heed without jeopardizing ourselves unnecessarily, I do not yet know. Remember, that was not live, as you put it. It was only your memory, your exegesis? Exegesis? Man, I don't know how to say that word. Of what you saw. I believe you were in less danger even last night than you may fear. What this is a little like, what are those machines with the strange radiance which attract insects to their deaths? You were zapped. The machine does not register the bug, it merely zaps. So, yeah, that's interesting. I like that there's like just sort of something in place to deter, to stop or kill, like, and she like gets a feeling that somebody's after her, or somebody's sensing, and that's not necessarily what's going on. So he says, I think I will ask you not to go near that place again for the time being, even if that Pat asks you to try. And when she mentions the goddess of pain, he gets very quiet. So yeah, I'm really curious because there's a way that he reacts about the goddess of pain that makes me feel like he knows who that is. She doesn't explain to him in this. I don't remember, like, I don't think that she has mentioned her. Neither has Khan. So I guess that's meant to be a conversation that they kind of had off page. But he seems to get it when she says that. I can say no to the goddess if I have to, I said, perhaps a little more loudly than necessary. I'm certain you can, Sunshine, said Khan. He was gone a moment later. I didn't exactly see him go, but I didn't hear him moving away from me, and didn't see the shadow among the other shadows after he was gone. I didn't pay a lot of attention, however, because I was preoccupied with the feeling on my mouth as if he had kissed me before he left. I don't know how I feel about this, you guys, the two of them. I don't know. I don't know if I like this. Very on the fence. Just seems a little weird. So, more talk about going to work and SOF always being there, about Mrs. Bielowski keeping an eye on things and making sure to keep away people who are just there to pester her because she's kind of getting a reputation for being in the thick of things, I guess. And she goes in early and is cooking, and Theo comes by to talk to her from SOF, and tells her that Pat wants to see her and that the goddess of pain is looking to try and take over what Pat's been doing with Ray, which is really, really bad news. Like, when she tells him that she feels like something broke and that she's not able to see this anymore, it's almost preferable to them that that be true than for the goddess of pain to take this over. Like, and she's being kind of petty about it, not Ray, but the goddess, because she's like really resentful of the fact that Pat might have zeroed in on Ray as being a valuable source of information before she did. So there's a few things going off. Something that might be important, something she might be able to use. If I wasn't afraid of the goddess already, I would be now. He smiled. It was a rickety sort of smile. You don't know half. You don't want to know half. You want my advice, you stick to suckers. When do you get off? Pat'll come by just before. And Pat does, and he looks terrible. Poor boy. I don't know what's going on with him. It's supposed to be like, that he's part blood, so he's able to like keep up his energy pretty well. So shit must be really rough if he's looking like this. Then there's like these weird little asides throughout all of these stories about the food, which you know that I love. And there's the talk earlier about her making cornbread and him like slathering butter on it and watching it soak in, which made me fucking crave cornbread. And then there's this part. I'd made my special cream cheese sauce to go with the triple gingerbread. I'd long felt that gingerbread, while excellent in itself, was still essentially an excuse to eat the sauce. So I'd always made twice as much proportion as the original recipe called for. Then it turned out that some of our customers were even more crazed than I was, so I'd started making 3 times as much, and we served it in little sauce boats. You got purists occasionally that didn't want any sauce, but the slack was taken up somehow. Guys, where is this coffee house and how do I get there? Because I have not had any place in my life that does this shit that she talks about. Like whole plates of cookies and gingerbread served with a sauce boat and champagne or coffee or loose leaf tea in pots. Where is it? I want to go to there. I would live there. Please. Just point the way. Because, like, I'm not even kidding either. Like, I have never heard of a place that is this intense with just dessert type stuff. And it's not, there's a real kitchen that does, like, regular food also. But that's my point, is that most places that do regular food, dessert is a complete afterthought, and they know everybody's just going to be happy with a fucking shitty prepackaged brownie or frozen cheesecake. Most places do not take the time to make everything from scratch, both savory and sweet. I just need it. I need it in my life, please. Oh, it sounds so great. So the goddess doesn't need thumb screws. She just looks at you and you feel your brains melting. I believe you. Theo says you've lost it. Yeah, I'm safe from the goddess. No brains left to melt. No one is ever safe from the goddess. The Pat I knew surfaced, and he gave me a familiar look. Shrewd, humorous, no nonsense. How lost do you suppose it is? And they kind of go back and forth here, and she finally is like, look, I'm just really glad that I don't have to try that again, because it freaked me out. And he appears to be willing to accept that, but it's obviously not entirely true. Like, and he can tell. Finally, she says that she's sorry. Like, they go out and have some coffee together in the back courtyard. And he says that he believes that she's sorry, but that's kind of the only thing that he believes. Makes my life easier in some ways. Maybe by the time you've decided you're not burned out anymore, the goddess will have found someone else to crucify. I didn't say this, but watch your back, sunshine. Then he left. That's a little worrisome. So then there's this moment where she just asks Mel, do you suppose anyone is exactly who they say they are? Charlie, maybe, he answered after a little pause. Can't think of anyone else. And I like that he doesn't try and go, well, me, baby. No, he's like, yeah, you're aware I'm not who you think or who I say, so that's fine. And this is when we get into some shit about the tattoos. I watched his hand lift off the table and rub one of his tattoos. Maybe I should have been thinking about tattoos myself, but there's a real big drawback to them. Any charm can be turned against you if you run into the thing it's supposed to be protecting you from, and the thing is enough stronger than the protection. A powerful enough demon adept or magic handler can overwhelm one too, although that's serious feud stuff and not so common. A tattoo feeds itself on you, so tattoos do tend to be a lot more stable and longer lived than the ordinary charms that you set around and hang up, including the ones you wear next to your skin. But a charm that isn't living off you can be destroyed a lot more easily if it does go rogue. A rogue tattoo can eat you up. It happens occasionally. Before 5 months ago, I didn't figure I needed any heavy warding. Now that I did, tattoos were the last thing I was going to try. That's such a cool idea, that it's feeding off of you, and because of that, it's stabler and better as long as you are sure that you're not going to run into something that's going to be able to overpower it, and that it's going to be angry enough at you specifically to try and turn it against you. That's a pretty scary thought, and the only way I would imagine to undo something like that is to burn it off your skin or slice it off or God knows what. And then she talks about sorcerers who wear like long robes and deep hoods because they are handling magic, and sometimes their tattoos can interfere with that. So it's not just like to be mysterious, it's actually a protective thing. Long sleeves and high collars are hot in the summer, and there are favorite sorcerer tattoos that go on your lips and cheeks and forehead too. But magic can apparently be a bit perfunctory about certain things in the heat of a transaction. Any tattoo a sorcerer wants working while he or she handles magic can't be distorted with face paint or pancake foundation because it may turn out to be the apparent figure that performs or doesn't. Interesting. So if you use makeup to hide your tattoos, if your tattoo gets altered by this makeup in such a way that it looks like something else, there is a chance that the something else it looks like in that moment will be what the spell actually works on, rather than what the full tattoo actually is, or rather than the nothing that you're hoping to be visible because you were trying to hide the tattoo altogether. That's a lot of responsibility. And then I'm telling you guys the detail on this. A lot of magic-bearing tattoos can sort of unbalance you. You start not being quite sure where the real-world lines are, with a lot of tattoos whispering in your dreams. What? Of course, having lots of magic-bearing tattoos is one way of saying you're a tough guy, first before the implication that you need all that charm and ward power, and second, because you're hardy enough to bear the drain and the disorientation. But there are better ways of showing you're a tough guy than having lots of tattoos, partly because no tattooist who wants to keep his or her license is likely to cooperate, and the ones who don't have licenses are too likely to make a mess of it. There is only one small secondary quarter circles difference between a ward against drunkenness and another one against eye strain, for example, and the latter won't get you home safely with a load on. And that's one of the common simple wards, and most of Mel's tattoos weren't common or simple. But they were magic bearers, not ornamental. You could smell it, like ozone when a storm is coming. And besides, nobody who had any pretensions to hanging out with a biker gang would dare have ornamental tattoos. Ornies are for wusses. Ornies. Ornies, you guys. And yeah, there's just a lot of talk about Mel's tattoos and the fact that he keeps his sleeves up and his shirt open even though it's January and freezing, and I'm just dying to know what the fuck Mel is, really, frankly. Guys, please, thank you. And when she asks him straight up, who are you? He's like, I'm your friend. Everything else is just static. I'm like, Mel, apparently Ray does not have a problem with that answer. But, buddy, I hate it. And you're going to need to go and redo your work and try again, sir. Yeah, no, that is not reassuring to me. I don't feel like Mel is harmful. I don't get the sense that he's like somebody that we need to be worried about. That's not the problem. It's just they have a pretty intimate relationship, and she doesn't know anything about him, it feels like. You know? I just worry. I worry about you, Ray, alright? Alright, so, I drove home thinking about that watch your back. And she goes into the glove compartment and grabs out everything, all of the charms and everything, and decides to bring them to Yolande to check out. And Yolande finds a fetch in among them, which is not something that her mom would have given her. Now, I'm going to find the definition of fetch, because what is a fetch? Because it's not actually defined here. Fetch, folklore. A fetch is a supernatural double or an apparition of a living person in Irish folklore. It is largely akin to the doppelganger, and sightings are regarded as omens, usually for impending death. The origin is unclear. That does not feel like that's what this is about, though. The term fetch is sometimes glossed for the Scandinavian fjellja, an animal alter ego in Norse mythology connected to a person's fate. Though unlike the Irish concept, the fjellja is almost always female. Interesting. I'm trying to see the fetch is a malevolent narrator of Patrick McCabe's 2010 novel The Stray Sod Country, which temporarily inhabits the bodies of residents in a small Irish town, causing them to commit both psychological and physical harm to themselves and others. Ooh. Since there's no definition in the text of this book, and this is not the definitions that I'm finding out here are not what I'm looking for. I'm trying to figure out, here we go. What is a thought fetch? Here's another term that many in the metaphysical community use and don't truly understand. A fetch is a manifested thought form that is created for a specific purpose of which you have control. In the subconscious level, you can create a fetch and not even know it by thinking and sending out those thoughts in the universe with enough will and energy that it manifests a being to do your bidding. So in all of these different cases, a fetch is a living thing, living in quotes, like it was brought to life, or it is at least like gives the impression of being something that is alive. And that's not exactly what's going on here. Like this thing is moving around, definitely, but all the charms move around and have a sort of consciousness, at least of the protection that they're meant to give. They are aware that they were created to do a job. And this is a very different thing, and I'm not entirely sure about it. So lift it up again, if you would, she said. I did, and she took something out of a drawer and spread it out, then gestured for me to put the knapsack on it. I did. Whatever was going on subsided. I opened the knapsack, but had a sudden reluctance to touch the charms. Wait, she said, and brought something else out of another drawer, a pair of wooden tongs. They had symbols scrawled up their flat sides. I groped around, grasped an end of the tangle, and hauled it out. It seemed to have half unraveled itself. It came out looking like a crochet gone very, very wrong. As it came free of the knapsack, one end snaked around, as if seeking something, and then began climbing up one arm of the tongs, toward my hand. Drop it, said Yolande sharply. I dropped. It landed on the desk. There was a hiss and a bad smell, a really bad smell. And then there was a forlorn little heap of bad crochet work plus one spark plug with a torn-out hole in it edged by a purply-brown stain. The stain writhed. Ugh, I said. Ugh, indeed, Yolande said mildly. That was no ward. That was a fetch. Where was it? In my car? Do you keep your car locked? Not here, I said. So whatever place this, if it had come here, I would have known it. So they've come to the conclusion that whoever put this in her car did it when she was at work. Thus, they were able to get into a locked car. And there is no way, like, as, talented as Yolande is, she can't exactly trace back who made this. I'm trying to see if there's anything specific about it that she's able to really nail down. I'm trying to find, because this is when we get to talk about the alloys in cars, wards that dissolve into paint, and then the best ward being the motion of traveling. Yolande had picked up something that looked like a knitting needle. It even had a tiny hook on the end and was poking at the mess of crochet. There was one pale blue bead that still had a bit of glimmer to it. I think some of these were live quite recently, she said. I think what they have warded is the usefulness of the fetch, which has worn them out. You don't have any idea when you acquired it, I don't suppose. How long have you been stuffing charms into the glove compartment? I said absently. A fetch was usually roughly the shape of the thing to be fetched. Something that was trying to find or fetch a person was often a sort of elongated star shape with a bead or crystal or a chip at the center for the heart, and smaller beads or crystals or chips for the head, hands, and feet. I was sure I would have noticed my mother giving me a fetch, and besides, she wasn't that stupid. So, whoever did this was trying to get her, like, she comes to the conclusion that it's SOF that put this in her car, which I'm gonna guess is probably right. SOF, then, this is meant to get her to cooperate, I guess? Or, I'm not sure how prolonged a fetch effect is. Like, if it's left in her car, will she constantly be feeling like she should go visit SOF headquarters and be involved in that? Or will it just work to get her somewhere once and then be burnt out and done? Is it a physical thing, bringing her to headquarters, like getting her? Or is it a mental thing where you're trying to, like, influence someone's actions in general and not specifically get them somewhere? But yeah, I'm just really curious about them. And she realizes that, like, at one point she had opened the glove compartment and there was, like, all the charms in there had become this snarl and had fallen. A lot of them fell out and started to move really quickly to under the passenger seat. And that she noticed even at the time that they moved really quickly, but didn't really think about it because she was distracted. And she goes under the seat, grabs everything out of there and stuffs it back into the glove compartment. So her theory here is that they started moving really quickly because the fetch had been placed under the passenger seat and all of these charms, which were meant to protect her, were heading straight for it in order to counteract it. Which, how cool is that? I fucking love that idea. That's so wild. Like, they're just like little soldiers that are like, attack! And they just fucking jump out and, like, go under. I love it so much. And then she just stuffs it in there with all of them and they all just, like, descend on it, and they get fucked up and, like, ruined by doing this, but that's what they're for. And once they are expended, they, like, turn into just, like, a mass of knots and whatnot, and are no longer these, like, neatly little made things. Which I love this whole concept. It's just delightful. I love it. I really do. Rosalie says, I know I would get so personally attached to charms in this world, like they would be my little buddies. Right? I agree. Like, honestly, just me saying, like, they head out there like little soldiers and then they're expended. I'm just like, ouch. That is cold-blooded, you know? Like, there's a thing in Community, where he says that human beings can become attached to anything. Like, I can take this pencil, tell you its name is Steve, and then do this, and he breaks it in half, and a little part of you dies. And I'm like, yeah, what is that? I just, like, don't know why we are able to just relate to everything and sort of give everything a personality, even when it may not really have one, but we definitely do. So, yeah. She's a little startled at the idea that SOF does this, but Yolande isn't, because Yolande is a realist who's like, yeah, they're part of a giant organization, which is naturally going to be corrupt, which is not to say that they don't have their place. Like, she's really quick to qualify this. Like, they're going to be corrupt. They're going to do some shaky stuff, but I don't want you to think that I'm anti-SOF either, because clearly some of what they do is good. So I like that, you know, I appreciate that she's like she's not trying to turn them into the enemy here. She's just trying to make Ray aware that these people are going to do what they need to do to get your cooperation or get whatever they need out of you. And you can't trust that they're on your side. They're not on your side. They're on the side of whatever gets them what they want. And they're not going to be ashamed of doing some real shady stuff to accomplish that. So, I admire that. I think that's very fair. So, all right, then she starts talking about the fact that her master, when he was training them, like, would always get a little bummed when people would go off and work for these giant corporations, because he knew that there were going to be some questionable activities happening. And she says it's still better that SOF exists than it not exist. One must also earn a living. There's no equivalent in the SOF world for my master's small group of wards keepers. She was right there. The Sentinel Guild are pretty sad, and the Vindicators are worse. Which, I guess, are those like mercenary types? I just really, like, every time she mentions little things like this, I always just want to know more. I want there to be like a wiki for this book, and it's not a big enough book, and because it's only the one and it's not a series, there isn't. But like, I want one. Probably, maybe there is. It's been out for so long, and people get very specific and do things on their own. Maybe somebody's done an independent wiki. So, and she mentions that Pat is also a friend, like that he's somebody that she can trust to kind of have her best interest at heart, which she knows because she had wards around this bench that he sat at while he was waiting for Ray to come downstairs, and that the bench, the wards around it, quote, took notes for the entire time that he was sitting there. So that is kind of amazing. I love that she knows this. Like, that's a really valuable piece of information. But yeah, that it's not just about his career. It's not just about his goals for him. Like, he does actually give a shit what happens to her, which is nice. Appreciate it. So finally she tells Ray, I am going to need some blood so that I can make something very special just for you to help protect you. I need you to tell your vampire buddy that this attack that you two are planning to make on Beau can't be done in the next couple days, because it's going to take a few days for us to make this, which is a little startling for Ray because it hadn't really sunk in yet that she was going to have to attack Beau soon. Like, I think she was just willing to sort of put that off as a, well, maybe someday. And now she's being given like a specific time frame, and Yolande thought it might be sooner than a few days, which I think really alarms her, So she goes and tells him, she sends him another message, a few days. And there's an interesting moment to start off the next section. So what do you do when you know you have 2 days to live? Wait a minute. Haven't I been here before? No, I was only pretending last time. I hadn't known that I was sure Con would save me last time till this time, when I knew he wouldn't. But I had been here before. I was still finding out I had more stuff to lose by losing it, and I already knew. I thought this was a triple Carthaginian hell of a system. Oh my God, sorry guys. So that's an interesting thing, because now she's sort of saying that she knew that she was dying. Which, I guess, in retrospect, she's maybe realizing that she kind of knew, but it didn't feel that way when I was reading it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I really kind of understand that to a degree, that you'll look back and realize that you were more aware of what was happening than you really thought you were at the time, but you just never let yourself think about it. Because why would you let yourself think about something super unpleasant like the fact that you're dying? And nobody else is supposed to know that your wound hasn't healed. Like, you're hiding the very evidence of it. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. So she decides that she's going to go nuts buying flowers and filling her place with flowers and getting champagne and putting roses everywhere, like even her car. And that she thinks about who she's going to say goodbye to. And it turns out, nobody. She's not going to say goodbye to almost anybody, because everybody is somebody that would either be alarmed by the fact that she's saying goodbye. All the people who are the most important to her would know something was up, or saying goodbye is just wouldn't really feel like anything. It doesn't matter. Which is a weird place to be. Like, she needs to be careful enough to act casual and everything, but also wants to kind of let people know that she gives a shit, but she's so closed off most of the time that in itself is just a real, like, a giveaway. And when she finally leaves to, like, head home, Mel is there, and she gets really emotional because he asks her to hang out on Friday, and she really believes that she's going to be dead on Friday. So she tells him, okay, I'll see you then, and then has to, like, run away before she starts crying, which is pretty rough. The only thing about this section is that I'm so certain she's not going to die that it's hard for me to, like, get into this mindset. And I'm saying that with the full awareness that I may be wrong. But I'm pretty confident that she's not going to die. Because of reasons. Just like, you know, she's a hero. This doesn't feel like the kind of book that's going to take that sort of risk and just kill her at the end. Also, you know, we've already talked about whether or not the writer's going to do a sequel. Probably wouldn't happen if she was dead, unless it was a totally new character. I just don't see that happening. So, yeah, she's, like, just really in a bad place, and she goes and sees Yolande, and this is so cool. Yolande drew me into her workroom. There was a little heap of sunlight on her desk. What? I blinked. It looked like as if there was a chink in the blind, letting a single ray in to make a pool there, except it wasn't a pool, it was a heap. And there was no ray of sun. I could feel my eyes fizzing back and forth like a camera's automatic lens trying to find the right setting and failing. The heap cast no shadows. It was a small domed hummock of pure golden light. I had stopped to stare, and Yolande went to her desk and picked it up. It seemed to flow over her hands, slowly, like rivulets of warm honey, or small, friendly, sleepy snakes. It was, I thought, as it separated itself over her fingers, a lattice work of some variety. The filaments met and parted in some kind of pattern, and the filaments themselves seemed to carry a pattern, like scales on a snake's back. It moved slowly, but it moved. It curled around Yolande's wrists. My strange sense of it, them being friendly but half asleep, remained. It will wake up when it touches you, she said, as if reading my mind. We had to put it together in great haste, and it's not yet used to being manifest. She came toward me, stretching the light net gently between her hands like a cat's cradle, and threw it over me. For a moment I was surrounded by twinkling lights, and then I felt it, them settling gently against my skin, delicate as snowflakes, but warm. Bemusedly, I held one arm out to watch the process. You know how if you concentrate, you can feel when snowflakes land on you, feel the chill of them almost individually at first till your face or arms begin to go numb with cold, and then they melt against your skin and disappear. So it was with these tiny light flakes. I saw them as they floated down, shimmering down, felt them when they touched me, lighter than feathers or gossamer, and all over me, for clothes were insubstantial to them. But they were not merely warm. A few of them were uncomfortably hot, and left tiny pinprick red marks, and while they dissolved on contact like snowflakes, they appeared to sink through the surface of my skin, leaving nothing behind. No dampness, no stickiness, no shed scales. After they'd all vanished, if I turned my arm sharply back and forth, I could just see the webwork of light, like veins, only golden, not blue. I itched faintly, especially where belt and bra straps rubbed. So that's awesome. I don't know exactly what this does. She says, it's not a ward, or only indirectly so. It's a form of come hither, but generally only sorcerers ever use anything like it. It gathers your strength to you. It taps into the source of your strength more strongly than you can unaided. Most magic handlers have a talent for one thing or another, and it's drawn from one area of this world or another. So this is when she talks about the affinity that different sorcerers have with different elements. And I do not understand in this moment why Ray says my affinity is for vampires, because it's fucking obviously sunshine, you dum-dum. But, yeah, Yolande does say, okay, no, it's not sunlight. It's not vampires. Like, the sunlight is obviously something that gives you strength and keeps you healthy, but you are probably able to handle vampires a little bit better than most people because of your affinity with sunlight. Just like somebody who has an affinity for water would be able to make it through a desert more easily, or somebody who has an affinity for fire can deal with cold. Just the being full of a certain element's abilities and properties is going to keep you safer from the opposite, which is an interesting idea, that you're safer from it versus being weaker to it, which most of us, I think, would kind of naturally think that's going to be the case. She calls it a counter affinity. It is the strength of the element in you that makes you more able to resist and simultaneously embrace its opposite. You are not consumed by the dark because you are full of light. So that's pretty cool. I like that. That's pretty rad. And she mentions seeing in the dark, and Yolande says, perhaps you will tell me more about that sometime. I might be able to help. Sometime, I thought. Yeah. The shadows on you don't wiggle, though. They just lie there, like all shadows used to. Ah, that will perhaps be the purification process of wards keeping. If you become a master, as I eventually did, you go through a series of trials that are to make you what you are as intensely as possible. You would not be able to do what a master does without this. I imagine you will see other masters of their craft as you see me. What? Will make you what you are as intensely as possible. What does that even mean? What is that? It's like, sounds like she got condensed or something. So she looks out onto her arms at all of the sparkly, lacy gold that's under her skin and thinks how cool it is. And she thanks Yolande while wishing that more people would get to see this, except that she'll be dead. What a bummer, right? And finally, she goes back to her apartment and sits inside the open doors of the balcony, and she is just waiting for Khan to show. And that is the end of this section. Now we have part 4. Dun dun. So, guys, do you have any questions for me before I wrap up? This is a lot of fun. I like this section a lot. There's all kinds of stuff happening. And Yolanda's rad. Yolanda's like the McGonagall of this universe. Just a very no-nonsense lady. I like her. So, question, what sweet treats do you like to make, girl? What sweet treats do I do not like to make? To be honest, there are some things that I don't like making. Mostly things that are like fiddly. I love to eat macarons. I do not like to make them. But one of my favorite things to make is this really simple pound cake recipe that my mom used to make when I was a kid. And I changed it recently, and it became one of the best things I ever put in my fucking mouth. I think it's the Silver Palette Cookbook Bishop's Cake is the original recipe. And I changed out a 1/4 cup, or maybe even a whole 1/2 cup, but I don't remember, of the regular flour for ground almonds. I tripled the amount of, I doubled the vanilla extract and added a teaspoon of almond extract. And I think I added a little bit more, and it comes out like moist. It's unbelievable. It's so good. So that's it's really, really easy to make. And the alterations that I made on it, it's just, honestly, I made it with the almond flour for the first time, like last month. And Owen was just like, what the fuck did you do to this? Oh my God. Like, we polished off that entire bunk cake in like 3 days between the two of us. It was a not healthy thing. So that's probably my number one favorite. And other than that, like, I make these amazing brownies that are just, it's melted, you melt butter and dark chocolate, not even dark, unsweetened chocolate on the stove, and then you stir in the sugar, and then you stir in the flour and the vanilla, and then pour that into a pan, and they are so dense and fudgy. You shouldn't be asking me these questions, girl. You're going to make me go out there and just demolish whatever's in my path. But yeah, those are two of my favorite things. And lemon bars. And I make my lemon bars very tart. I always add more lemon zest and more lemon juice, and I always cut the amount of sugar in the recipe every time. And it has never failed me. Every time I do that and make them and bring them somewhere, people say these are the best lemon bars I ever had. And I'm like, no fucking kidding, because everything is way too sweet. But everybody just makes it as it's written down because they don't realize you can do what you want. You don't have to write it. Do it just as it's written. Do what you want. So yeah, when it's tart, that's my like weak spot, and that's why I love key lime pie also. I don't make that nearly as much as I should, considering how easy it is. But key lime pie, if you really like tart, make a recipe that does not require baking, and you will be able to have very tart with no bitter aftertaste, because it's the baking that can kind of mess up the flavor of the limes, because it's really, really delicate lime juice. Tip from me to you. Anything else? Anything not food related? Rosalie, who's trying to sabotage my calorie count for today? All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again to Rachel for commissioning this episode. Thank you to Rosalie for commissioning this book. And yeah, I'm really excited to keep reading and find out what the hell happens with Bo and if her dad is going to be around, because mostly I'm interested in her grandma, to be honest, because she sounds rad. But I'm just curious about her dad because of his reputation. So, all right, well, thanks, guys, and I'll see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.